and welcome. Welcome to New England Authors with Kameel Nasr. I am Kameel Nasr. We have a very interesting program today because we're talking with a veteran, Michael Anthony. Michael, welcome to the show. And we're talking with a veteran about something that's kind of grave, about post-traumatic stress disorder and suicides, and something that you personally know about. So let's start with the beginning. You joined and spent 12 months in Iraq, right?
Yep, I was in Iraq more towards the early part of the war back in 06 to 07 during that whole surge process.
So you went there and you were stationed there and you saw a lot of bad things.
Yeah, I mean, I worked in a hospital, so we were in the hospital zone, so you know, we weren't out like the infantry guys doing the patrols and stuff like that, but we were always in the hospital seeing the results of those patrols. So we'd get all the injured back at our hospital, all the injured soldiers, insurgents, multinational forces, they'd all come back through our doors.
Now, were you prepared for this?
Yeah, I mean, the Army prepares you as best as you can. I mean, you know, nothing can prepare you for war. You know, the only thing that can really prepare you for war is war itself, you know, and then you just get prepared every day you're there. You get more and more prepared. But before that, you know, we had pre-mob training and then our Army training as well too.
Pre what?
Pre-mob. So when you get deployed, you're mobilized.
Oh, I see.
So
I see.
Before you go overseas, you have your pre-mob training, which is they put you through this kind of condensed training before you go overseas.
Now, if I got you right, it was the more traumatic experience was coming back home than being in Iraq. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked with a lot of vets since coming back home, and I've done a lot of work with veterans, and you know, it's interesting. You know, there's all these statistics about veterans and veteran suicides. You know, where every day in the United States they say between 20 and 22 veterans kill themselves. There's, you know, 20 to 30% of returning vets have PTSD, they estimate. But you know, what's kind of crazy with all these statistics is that veterans are over 50 times more likely to actually kill themselves back home than they are actually in a war zone, you know, so...
Yes, I read that statistic in the book. 50 times more likely to commit suicide.
Back home than they are actually during the war zone, you know. So a lot of people, you know, blame the war itself for, you know, causing these symptoms or these feelings. But, you know, I think the interesting part is that when they're actually in the war zone, in the midst of what's supposed to be causing these feelings or causing this road towards suicide or depression, they're not likely to kill themselves. So actually, once they're back home, that they're actually more likely to kill themselves. So once they're out of that danger zone or the area that's supposedly leading them towards this road of PTSD or depression or suicide, you know, it's actually once they actually leave there that they're more likely to kill themselves.
I see. And then you came back and you wrote a book, Civilianized. Very interesting book. Like, we talk about being militarized, we don't talk about being civilianized. So you came back. What did you experience when you came back, you know?
Yeah, so I mean, it can be kind of rough when you come back, you know, to say the least. You know, you're overseas.
Yeah, it was very rough for you. You were taking Vicodin and other drugs and drinking and smoking.
I mean, overseas, you know, they can kind of hand out that stuff pretty liberally, you know, because you're over there, you're killing yourself working all this time, so they can give you Vicodin if you're in pain or you're having problems sleeping, because everyone's having problems sleeping because you're getting bombed all the time, your sleep schedule's changing. So they give you Ambien. So I came back home and I've still kind of taken some Ambien and Vicodin and just smoking, you know, a pack and a half a day, just kind of in that kind of not a positive zone, you know.
Yeah.
Combined with all the stuff I experienced overseas. So me and a bunch of my buddies came back in not the best of space.
You were angry.
Yeah, I mean, I was angry.
That's what comes out from reading your book. That's what comes out. There was a lot of anger there.
I was angry. I was disappointed. You know, back then you got to realize these guys. You know, when you're overseas, you're fighting for something. You've got a sense of adrenaline, a sense of purpose, and then you come back home. I remember coming back home and I was talking to this girl, and this girl didn't even know we were still fighting overseas. You know, it's like two weeks earlier, I just had someone die in my hands, and I'm back home, and this girl doesn't even know, you know, that we're still overseas. Or we came back home right as the recession was hitting. So it's like you're overseas fighting, and then you come back home, and like no jobs are available. You know, places are shutting down. You're seeing, you know, unemployment rates skyrocket, and then you're seeing politicians attack one another. You know, we had the government shutdown. You know, they're always threatening government shuts down. So it's like you come back home, you lose that sense of purpose. You know, you don't have your brothers in arms around you all the time, and you come back home to a country that doesn't even know you're still fighting overseas, or a country that's in the middle of a recession.
Exactly.
You know, and there's no jobs available. So you come back home, and you know, what are you going to do with yourself?
So I heard you talk about this word. You use this word anchors. When you have people have anchors, right? That they have loved ones that they know, and this was very important to keep a person sane. And people who didn't have these anchors suffered more. Is that a correct way of saying it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I've done a lot of work with veterans, and you know, one thing that definitely can help out people is having those anchors, something to keep them home, keep them in a type of stasis. You know, when you come back home, and if you get a family to come back home to, or a wife to come back home to, it can make the process a little bit easier. You know, not to say that there's not its own problems associated with coming back home and dealing with that, but you know, if you come back home and you're a young soldier and you've got nothing to really come back to, it can kind of hit you a little bit differently. And that's why for a lot of those, you know, negative rates that we do see for veterans, it did hit the younger veterans a lot harder.
How old were you when you enlisted?
I joined when I was 17. And
17?
Yeah, I joined when I was 17.
I thought that was illegal.
No, you just need a parent's signature, you know?
I see.
So I joined when I was 17, and then I came back from Iraq when I was 21. So I was still very young, very fresh, and just trying to find my place in the world amidst all these feelings I was feeling about coming back home, and frustrations with my commanders in Iraq, frustrations with the people back home who didn't seem to care that we were overseas fighting and people were dying.
Yeah. Well, so you brought up the statistic, 22 people a day commit suicide, 22 veterans.
Yeah, they say between 20 and 22.
Yeah, a remarkable, I mean, that's like 1 an hour. That's just a remarkable statistic.
Yeah,
And I know so my era is the Vietnam War. I mean, I had friends who served in the Vietnam War, and I know that more veterans died after the war of suicide than actually died in the war.
I mean, I've heard similar statistics as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really shocking. So let me talk a little about war itself. Why do you think the United States went to war in Iraq?
I mean, why do I think they went to war in Iraq?
Yes.
I mean, you know, there's a bunch of reasons. You know, I think it could have been. Well, you know, there's an old joke that, you know, the occupation of Iraq it was called the Operation Iraqi Freedom, right? When I was overseas, it was called OIF, Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Yeah.
There's an old joke that originally it was called Operation Iraqi Liberation, but they changed the name because the acronym was OIL, you know? So, I mean, there's always, you know, everyone has their own reasons, their own jokes why we always went over there.
There were a lot of jokes that came out at the beginning of the war. Yeah, unfortunate jokes, right. So why did we go into war?
Well, I mean, you know, it's hard to say. One story I always think of when I think of people going to war, or people willing to go to war. I remember when I was in basic training, and I heard this. One of these guys shared a story that his mother had shared with him, and it was a story about a little boy who was watching TV with his parents, and parents flipping through the TV, a news clip about the war in Iraq comes on, and the little boy's like, you know, Mom, Dad, why are we at war with Iraq, right? Kind of asking like that with that same innocence. And the dad turns off the TV, he thinks for a second, and he looks out the window and he sees this young couple moving in across the street. And he's like, son, what if we look out that window and we see that man start to beat his wife? What do we do? And he's like, you know, son, what if as we're watching him beat his wife and we're trying to decide what to do, we see all our other neighbors are seeing this and not doing anything else as well? What do we do? And the son's like, you know, oh, well, we call the police, Dad. So Dad's like, okay, we call the police, and the police come. But what if by that time, you know, he stopped beating his wife, she doesn't want to press charges? Or maybe, you know, they don't get there in time, or they're back inside the house and they don't see anything. It's just a domestic dispute. There's nothing they can do, right? So what do we do then, son? And then what if the man who was beating his wife thinks it was his neighbor, this little old lady, Marie Johnson.
Yeah.
What if he thinks it was her who called the police? So he goes and knocks on her door, and he starts pounding on her door and starts beating her. What do we do? And the son's like, well, I don't know, Dad. What if we call the police again? Well, he's like, the police were just there. Maybe they're across town. What if they can't get there in time? What do we do? And what about, and then he's talking to his son, he's like, and what if while we're still trying to decide what to do, we see him coming across towards our house, right? And he sees us looking at him, seeing us, spying on him. And what if he starts knocking on our door and starts pounding on our door? What do we do? And the son's like, well, we lock the door and run upstairs, Dad. And the dad's like, what if it's too late? The police have already come. Maybe they can't get here in time. He's already enraged. The neighbors have already closed their blinds. And what if he breaks our door down and grabs your mother and I and starts beating us on our own front lawn? And the son's like, well, I won't let that happen, Dad. I'll stop him. He balls his little hands in a fist, tears falling down his eyes. He's like, I won't let that happen, Dad. I'll stop him. The dad's like, what if it's too late? And I guess, when I heard this story again, this is a story told in basic training as we're all getting ready to go overseas to war.
It seems like a story to get people aggravated to go to war.
Right, and
But there's got a lot of holes in the story.
Right, I mean, it's a loose illustration.
It's a loose illustration. It's like you see someone beating his wife, and you say, "Oh, that's terrible," and then you go beat the wife too. That's kind of
right. Yeah, that's a good way to think of it.
That's like what the war is.
Going over there, I think that was pretty much the mindset that we all had. Because you had 9/11, you had Afghanistan, and then there's that big jump into Iraq somehow.
Right.
So going overseas, that was kind of the mindset that we were in. Where you've got the Saddam gassed the Kurds. We're trying to fight terrorism in a whatever sense we can. Whatever it was, the big picture of it was.
Yeah.
I mean, so going overseas, we kind of had that story in our minds, like, oh, this is what we're going to stop. Not on our front lawn. 9/11 was on our front lawn. They came to our front door. They dragged us out.
Yeah, but it wasn't Iraq that came.
Right. That's the connection. That's the connection.
That was a false connection.
That's the connection that we were kind of fed there for a while, and there was that whole, memos and whether or not we're lied to, weapons of mass destruction, so I mean it's a bigger story there. But that was the mindset we, all of us young guys joined with, because we just wanted to fight and serve and, really just try to stop something like that from happening. And remember, when we joined, we didn't know if we were going to go to Afghanistan or Iraq. There's two wars going on at the same time. So I mean, it's not like you joined to go to Iraq or you joined to go to Afghanistan. We were all ready to go wherever they needed us, and that's where they said they needed us, which was Iraq. So I mean, we just went steadfast and tried to do our best.
This is New England Authors with Kameel Nasr, and I'm speaking with Michael Anthony, and his book is Civilianized, and it's a really good book. It's a personal account, and it's very personal. And very, you have a lot of self-awareness of what's going on inside you. You came and you were very frustrated, and you had made this decision to commit suicide yourself, right? In 3 months, if things didn't work out for you, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I was in a pretty dark space, and I was kind of just looking for a way out of this hole, and I don't know if I never considered myself depressed at the time. I just considered myself kind of just this empty kind of barrel, there wasn't even this feeling of depression or sadness. It was I kind of just felt empty, I'd done everything I'd done over here. I came back home and there's kind of nothing left. So I gave myself this kind of deadline, like I'll just give myself a couple of months, and if I don't feel better, that's when I'm just gonna end it. What's the point anymore? And that's kind of the story I pretty much focus on here, just that time putting my life together. It sounds grim, but it's not always as dark as it sounds. I mean, there's some humor there, and
there is humor in the book, and you're really nice. You seem like a really nice guy. We could go out and go next door and have a coffee or something. But you got in some bar fights and things like that. You must have been tense and just not knowing where you were at.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of guys come back that way. Like I said, a bunch of guys from my unit, we didn't come back in the best of place. In my unit, in my hospital alone of 200 people, we've already lost 3 to suicide.
Wow.
Including, dozens of others who've gone through PTSD clinics, drug and alcohol abuse clinics. So we got hit pretty hard. So yeah, some of us did come back in that negative space. And for me, I remember just coming back, over in Iraq, you've got that sense of adrenaline, that sense of purpose, and you come back and you lose it all. You go from 1,000 to 0, and coming back home, sometimes somebody can just say a stupid little slight or try to act like a tough guy, and it's like, this guy doesn't know where I was or what I've been through, and it just, you're kind of on that edge a little bit. And again, I wasn't in the best of space to begin with, so fights came a little bit easier when I first came back for me and a couple other guys that I knew too.
Yeah, well, what were the soldiers that you treated in the hospital? were they happy to be in Iraq? Were they patriotic? Were they
the soldiers that we treated?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, when we were treating a soldier, none of them were happy because they were all injured. So
of course, yes.
So I don't think any of them were pleased
No,
at that point.
But
I mean,
were they very?
well, when we gave them drugs, they all became pretty happy. Once we gave them their medicine, they all became pretty happy.
But you also treated a lot of the Iraqis. And there's a terrible story that you kind of told about how you sent them off to other hospitals and they got bad fate. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, war, it's complicated, it's messy. So we were working in a hospital and we got in a bunch of patients because we don't just do American soldiers or our allies. We treat everyone. We treat multinational forces, we treat civilians, we treat, everyone. We treat everyone that comes through our doors. That's part of the Geneva Convention.
Yes.
Right? We just treat them all as patients, not
right.
as soldiers, combatants, as patients. So we would treat a lot of Iraqi civilians, right?
This was right in Baghdad.
No, I was... Sorry. The first part of my deployment, I was up in Mosul, which is the northern part of Iraq.
Yeah.
And then about partway through our deployment, we got transferred to Al-Assad, which is about southwest a little bit. So I was in Mosul first part, and then Al-Assad the second part. So the story that you're talking about was up in Mosul, where we were getting a lot of Iraqi civilians. Some of them were just civilians that were coming in with whatever wounds. Some of them were just casualties of war, either casualties of us or casualties of the insurgents.
Right.
So we got a lot of Iraqi insurgents, and we fixed them up in the hospital, saved their lives. Did our jobs, did a great job. And at one point, one of the doctors was doing follow-up calls with some of these patients that we'd sent to other Iraqi hospitals. And the doctor found out that, again, war's messy, we're all just trying to figure things out as we go along. And it turns out that we had sent all these patients, like a dozen of them almost, to different hospitals. But we had sent some Iraqis to, the wrong hospital, where they may have been Sunni, and we sent them to a Shiite hospital, or they were Shiite, and we sent them to a Sunni hospital. So a lot of our patients that we had saved and should have, lived long, happy lives were killed because they were, the wrong religion, and we sent them to the wrong hospital. Sometimes the people were killed just for being seen in an American hospital. Sometimes we'd send them there, and then they would just kill them for being seen by the Americans. And then other times we would send them, save their lives, and send them to another hospital, and they would have simple wounds that would just be a simple care, and they would die anyway just because their hospitals didn't have supplies. So I mean, there's just a bunch of stories of that where we'd just be killing ourselves to save all these people. Surgeries are long, intensive procedures. Where there'd be times where we would be doing surgery while the hospital's getting bombed. So the lights would be flickering. The whole building would be shaking. At one point in time, our hospital actually, part of it collapsed during one of these attacks. So we're putting our lives on the line to save all these lives. We're killing ourselves working these 24-hour shifts, 7 days a week, and we do all this to save their lives. And then it's like, they died anyway just because we sent them to the wrong hospital, or they died anyway because we sent them to a hospital where they didn't have something as simple as sterile water.
Did you have much contact with the Iraqi people?
We, to an extent. I mean, we saw them as patients, and sometimes we had patients when their family members would come in when we had patients, because sometimes we would just do, sometimes...
No, I meant, did you go in the neighborhoods and shopping?
No, we weren't allowed to go into the neighborhoods and go shopping and stuff like that. We did have some locals that would work on base, and there was little, I wouldn't call it a shopping mall, but they had little strip malls, because we took over one of Saddam's bases. So there's plenty of stops where they had stores. So there's little strip malls there where they had some of the locals, selling cigarettes and DVDs and...
what's the other one?
DVDs, yeah.
What's DVD? Oh, DVDs. Oh, yeah, DVDs. Yeah.
No, it's not the military acronym.
Yes, that's right.
Just DVDs. They had a lot of bootleg DVDs over there. I mean, things that weren't even released in the U.S. yet on theaters. We'd be getting in DVDs over there. So, I mean, they'd sell cigarettes, DVDs. They had, tailors there where a lot of guys would get their own suits made. Rugs, haircuts, dry cleaners. So there was a lot of locals that we interacted with in that way, but not in going through town or anything like that.
So Michael Anthony, why did you write this book? What prompted you to write this book about your experiences? And were you a writer beforehand, or where did you get this?
I mean, I've always written. I've always kept a journal.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say I ever thought about myself as a writer, or it's anything I ever specifically thought of pursuing. It's just something I've always enjoyed. And once I started writing about the military, and I've started connecting with a lot of veterans, and I've heard feedback from thousands of them. So this is my second book, and I've heard feedback from thousands and
I
thousands.
didn't know it was your second book.
Yeah, my first book was specifically about my deployment to Iraq, and this is just about the homecoming.
I see.
So since then, I've heard it from thousands and thousands of vets, and I've done work with a lot of vets as well too. And there's just a need for that true narrative, that true story to be told.
Yeah,
one of the reasons I started writing this book was I'd been back home, and I was on a date with this girl, and I talk about the story in this book. And she was telling me about an article she'd read in a newspaper, and it was about an article that had been written about this soldier who was in Iraq, and how this guy was such a hero. He's the epitome of what every soldier should should strive to be.
Yes.
And she tells me the guy's name, and he was one of the my leaders in Iraq, and he was one of the biggest dirtbags in the unit. So she's telling me about the story, calling this guy a hero. And knowing the truth. And I've heard other stories too of people just making up these false narratives, just trying to make themselves sound better, trying to make the war sound what it wasn't. So I talked with some friends, and I just started writing. I took my journals from Iraq and just started, writing. And that was my first book. And then this book, I just continued that process because I saw that a lot of vets had been having their own struggles after the war. So I just wanted to write something to let them know that they're not alone, and let them know about my struggle. And then,
one of your struggles was dating, right? You hired a dating agency to help you out, right?
Yeah. So like I say, when I came back,
was it successful in the end?
Well, I've been married for a couple of years.
So tell how did that happen?
So when I came back from Iraq, like I said, I was 21, and I was in that kind of dark zone, trying to dig myself out of this hole that I was in. So I gave myself a couple of months to feel better. And I came back from Iraq, and I had a lot of money in the bank from all my deployment money, because there's nothing to buy over there. So I had all this money in the bank, and I'm 21 years old, and I was...
it was like $50,000.
I had over $50,000, because you're overseas, you're making a lot of money, you've got combat pay, hazard duty pay, and I came back home 21 years old with a lot of money in the bank, and I was just trying to find my way out of this hole, and I was always a big nerd in my life, could never talk to girls. So as I'm trying to dig myself out of this hole, I thought, hey, maybe if I can talk to girls, learn how to get laid or something like that, that would help me feel better about myself. So I started taking all these dating courses, because these guys called pickup artists. So they charge you like a couple $1,000. They go out with you on the weekend. They teach you how to be like cool guys and how to talk to girls.
In a bar.
So it was a very interesting experience, because then
that might be the wrong thing. Trying to pick up a girl in the bar
I remember doing online dating. And it's hard to do online dating when you've got a suicide deadline hanging over your head. So
yes, that's right. You had that three months. Yeah. If you didn't get your life together, you were going to take your life. What can we do, really, Michael Anthony? What can we do to help veterans? What can I do? What can the civilians do? What can this town do? What can New England do to help veterans?
Some of the biggest things that I've seen, and what I try to do, and again, this is why I've started to write, and I try to help other vets at writing about their experiences as well too, where I think part of the things that can help vets is just having, or at least starting this narrative, right? So there's a lot of programs out there that will help vets, right? But to even get these things started, we have to start and have these conversations, because a lot of people don't want to have these real conversations about war or coming home from war. And that's what I've tried to do with my writing, where, like, again, there was that article in the newspaper calling this guy a hero, right? So all I've tried to do with my writing is start that true narrative, so that a guy can come back home and feel like he can just tell his stories. When I do work with a lot of veterans, we're just shooting the breeze, sharing stories like two guys hanging out, right? I'll tell a stupid story about, my buddy who was doing push-ups and he had some condoms fall out of his pocket, right? It's a stupid story, but then this guy who's been back for a couple years hasn't been able to talk about the war. Instead of talking about the guy he saw killed or his buddy who died, he's like, oh, well, let me tell you this stupid story about my friend. So one way I've been able to reach and help a lot of veterans is just having just a narrative. It's not always about who did you see kill or what messed you up.
People talking
to each other.
It's mostly, so you're talking about veterans talking to veterans. You're not like me talking to you. Is that helpful?
Well, what I've seen personally is that's helped a lot of veterans. At least getting the ball starting for them to help themselves or seek help is just having those conversations with vets. Kind of a peer-to-peer, vet-to-vet conversation where it's a lot easier to just shoot the breeze like that, and you can share those stories. And I always started off just simple like that, because you don't always have to dive in like, oh, tell me about your friend that died. You know, it's like, oh, well, here's a stupid story about my stupid commanders and how they did this, and then they'll share a story, and then next thing we'll know, we'll just be a couple of guys, you know, laughing about things.
And writing your book, Civilianized, was a big thing for you. Was it, took a lot of work? Do you have an editor? Well, how did you work on it?
Yeah, so writing's, I wouldn't say it comes easy to me, but you know, I do enjoy writing a lot, and since I've come back home, I've gotten a BA in writing and then an MFA in writing as well too. So
oh, you went to school?
Yeah, I went to school at Leslie right here in Cambridge.
And that's was that part of the VA program, or?
Yeah, part of my.
Still have the VA.
The GI Bill. So the GI Bill helps your education. So the GI Bill paid for about 60% of my education, which was really good. So it helped me get my bachelor's and my master's. So
well, that's great. We're coming to the end of our show. Thank you so much for being with us, because this is Michael Anthony. Your book is Civilianized. We've barely kind of touched on the basics of it, of Vietnam. Excuse me, of Iraqi veterans and veterans. This is New England Authors with Kameel Nasr. Thank you.